when I was in the 4th grade and 10 years old, I entered a speech contest, and the theme was World's Greatest Invention. And I knew I was going to have stiff competition. I knew there'd be people there making the case for the wheel, and I knew there'd be somebody really clever who'd make the case for the number 0 or something like that. And I thought, okay, if I'm going to have any play in this speech contest, I'm going to have to go personal. I'm going to talk about what's the world's greatest invention to me. And at the time, it was the Amigo. The Amigo was a revolution in wheelchair design. It was invented by a man who created it for a relative who had multiple sclerosis. And it was designed for people with limited mobility who didn't want to be in a wheelchair. It gave them back in the Amigo their independence, their drive, their ability to take themselves through their world. I took a lot of this speech from the sales brochure. But I knew about it because my mother had just gotten one. She'd had multiple sclerosis for about 10 years, and over the course of that time, she'd gone from 1970s teacher, power woman on the go, in the slack suit and the lipstick, to a woman who spent a lot of her time inside. And with this Amigo, she had the chance, this is where the speech part kicks in, to change her life, to do things she'd never done before. And what an amazing invention, to give someone their life back. I didn't win, which was a real disappointment to me. But luckily, my mother was there, and she said, you know, Megan, the Amigo is great for us, but it's got a limited market. I mean, world's greatest invention, that's a pretty high bar. So you maybe were expecting too much. And yet the thing was, is the Amigo did really change our lives because we were able to do something that my mother loved, and we loved, my 2 sisters and I, and that was shopping. We got to go shopping at the mall with the Amigo. And at the mall, my mom was in her element. She could do everything she'd ever done before faster because she had this Amigo, and she would get in it. And she would drive like a bat out of hell, just she'd take the corners wide, she'd zoom through the racks of clothing, and if they were too close together and one of them caught on the Amigo and she happened to just pull them all forward onto the ground, she'd just keep going. And when we try and catch up with her, she'd say, well, now they know how wide the racks need to be accessible. I'm helping. And she could drive super fast until the battery ran out, which it always did, like 500 yards from the exit. We're almost there. But she had to get that one more shirt, that one more pair of pants, and now the battery was dead. Because it was just a little car battery, and you like attached it with leads. It was really rudimentary, and it was designed to take apart. So you could take the seat off, you could take the little front off, and then you could easily, if you're a 12-year-old girl, lift up the bottom. But it worked, we got shopping, it was good enough until the battery died, at which point this cart that was not designed to be a wheelchair would have to be pushed by me and my sisters all the way to the exit. And my mother was very encouraging. She'd say, you've got it, girls, that's right, keep going, we're almost there, just lean into it, lean into it. You're going to be able to get some speed when we get to the ramp up here, and you're going to want to because the cars aren't stopping, keep going, faster. We'd get in the car. We made it, as you can tell. But the great thing is that a few years later, she got another Amigo. This was the second Amigo. And it was redesigned. It had a wider wheelbase. It had 2 batteries, so it wasn't going to give out on us. It had tighter handling for the curves and going up and down. The only problem is that it weighed like 3 times as much, and it was much larger. So whereas my sisters and I had been able to manage with that smaller one, with this one, it was like a full-on pit crew conversation in the back of the car, like, I don't know, do we put that in the front or do we put this in the back? And it was like playing Tetris to try and get it in there. And there was only one way to get it in. And my sisters and I were not above complaining loudly to my mother, who was sitting in the car the whole time. She had to, but we got a little resentful after a while. And so we'd say, oh God, this is the worst design in the world, Mom. So the pressure was on her to find some way to keep going to the mall, to keep doing the things we want to do. And one of the things that she had gotten was hand controls for the car. So even as the disease progressed and she wasn't able to walk as much, wasn't able to use her feet as much, she was able to keep driving with this device that sounded like it should be more highly designed than it actually was. It was just 2 steel rods that were bolted directly into the gas pedal and the brake pedal. And then it was attached to a really rudimentary steel bar with a big black thing. And so you would be honestly like pulling this lever to push the gas, which is not a precision kind of movement to make, so that when you'd ride with her, she'd do the gas, and then we'd all be in the back of the car, and then she'd hit the brakes, and we'd all be in the front of the car. And that's why I didn't ride with her very much. And that's why it was my little sister who was in the car with her one day when they were going down a country road. My mom decided she had to get peaches from the farmer, because you know the farmers save the best peaches for themselves, so you got to go there and just ask them straight up for the best ones. And she's going down the country road with my little sister, and a car pulls out in front of them, and the car has an Amigo, just like hers, on the back, on like a platform. It was some kind of a lift that clearly went down. You could drive the Amigo on and lift it back up again. No more struggling at the back in the trunk. It was like the holy grail. And I need to point out, this is in the days before the internet, so she couldn't just go home and Google car lift Amigo thingy and expect to get a price sheet and have it delivered in 2 weeks. Like, if you saw it, that's it. That's your last chance. So she had to find out what it was. So she decides she's going to get these people to pull over, and she's going to ask them about it, because it's the South, and that's what we do down there. I'm just going to find out what it is. So she comes up really close, speeding up on, tailgating them. But now she's got to get their attention. So she takes her hand off the accelerator to wave. As soon as she does that, they get away from her. So she zooms up again. Hey, move over, move over. Hey, move over, honk, honk, move over, move. And she comes closer and closer. And I don't know why these people weren't moving over. I mean, wouldn't you if someone was waving frantically? They didn't until they did, and then they suddenly pull over to the side so fast that my mom doesn't have time to slam on the brakes with the hand controls, so she just keeps driving and drives away. And my younger sister said, didn't you want to ask them something? And she said, oh, they knew what I wanted anyway, it's fine. And the good news is that we did end up getting the lift. She was able to get the lift, and she was able to get a whole array of devices over the next few years as her condition worsened. And one of the best was her 3rd Amigo, and this one was even nicer, and it was just specifically designed for someone who did not walk anymore. That's where she was at. But that didn't mean that she wasn't driving it exactly the way she wanted to. In fact, it had become part of her. She knew how to drive this thing and sneak up on you with a motor, and she hey, Megan, I was, whoa, gosh! She could storm out of a room on the Amigo. She knew she was more machine than mother by this point in time. And she would still, and we even got a van because we just gave up on the trunk altogether. She would drive this cart into the van with its motorized ramp. And the clearance into the van was only about this much, but she didn't care. She'd take it full speed, and I'd be cringing every time, knowing it was going to take her head, but it didn't. She knew exactly where she was at all times. The only problem was that as the years went by, the disease began to affect her hands. So then her hands started losing strength. So she'd be going full speed somewhere, and her hand would just fall off, and she'd come to a sudden stop. And typically that's okay, except this one Mother's Day, she went to a restaurant, and you know Mother's Day in restaurants, there's a lot of people, and she's driving full speed down a hallway, and there's a waiter in hot pursuit with a big tray full of dishes right on her, and right then, her hand falls off, she comes to a stop. The waiter does come to a stop, but the dishes do not. The dishes just keep flying. And the whole restaurant looks at her. Luckily, my mother always had perfect lipstick, and she knew how to, hi, that was me, because there's no getting out of that one, you know it's you. And it was a few weeks after that my mom ended up in the hospital with a really severe attack. She ended up unconscious, and I was asked to fly back to North Carolina from Tacoma, and I met my 2 sisters there. And the doctor said that the disease had gotten to where it was affecting her internal organs, and so her body was shutting down. It was really the end. And so my sisters were all there. We wanted to be there with her. We wanted to all be together because we didn't want any of us to have the special status of being the one with Mommy, because we're all going to do it together if we're going to do it. So we're all sitting in here together. And we sat there all day and all night and all day and all the next night. And by the third day, we really needed a break. But for our entire lives, our mom had told us what to do. Pick up that Amigo, put it in here, come over there, go do this now. And suddenly she wasn't telling us anything, so we just weren't sure what to do. But we knew we needed to leave, so we let her know, okay, Mom, we're letting you know we're going. And because it would appear to everyone that she was completely helpless. There was nothing she could do to stop us. So we walk out, and we get into my sister's car, and we're saying, I sure hope this is okay. I sure hope we don't miss anything. My sister shuts her car door, and I go to shut my car door, and it won't shut. Like, it won't click. And I'm a little anxious, so I just start trying to shut the door. Come on, shut! And then the door goes clink, kink, falls off of its hinge. And my sister says, oh, that day at the restaurant with the dishes and all, when we were leaving, Mommy ran into the door of my van, and I thought for sure she'd broken it. And I guess she did, because it's finally broken. And I thought, oh, this is exactly what we need. This is just perfect. So we get out, we go back to my mother's room to figure out what to do. And her sister is there, and her minister is there. And we start to have a little conversation about the car door when we notice that my mom's breathing has slowed down. And we all gather around, and we were able to be with my mom for her last breath. We were all able to be together and with her. And that is exactly the way she would have wanted it to be. And it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for that Amigo. I mean, for all the times it let us down, drove us crazy, made our life more difficult, when it really counted, the Amigo came through. And I don't think that the Amigo designers had that particular moment in mind when they created it. I don't think that's what they wanted. But the whole experience taught me that we don't always know what kind of an impact our creations are going to have, and we really can't control the way that people use the ideas that we share with them. But even if it's a really small market, a niche audience, won't affect that many people or be totally world-changing, I think it's still worth it to do it because it can make a really big difference in someone's life. And that's the purpose of being creative, is to reach out and touch somebody in some way to help them live the life they really want to be living. So for my part, I'm going to stand by my original assessment 29 years ago, and I'm going to say the Amigo is the world's greatest invention.